Almost everywhere Jesus went, huge crowds came to see and hear him. One time, he began teaching by a lake. The crowd became so big that he actually had to speak from a boat out in the water. Jesus often told stories, called parables, about everyday life that were symbolic of who God was and what it meant to live in God's ways. Jesus also performed many miracles everywhere he went. He healed sick people and even raised some from the dead. He could also control the weather. One time, when Jesus and his followers were in a boat on a lake, a huge storm came in and the boat began to fill with water. Despite the storm blowing the boat around, Jesus was asleep. Panicked, his followers woke him up and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Jesus stood up and commanded the wind and the waves, "Quiet, be still," and the storm was gone. Many people were amazed at the miracles Jesus performed, but the religious leaders, called Pharisees, started to question where Jesus got his power from. At one point, they even accused him of getting power from the devil. King Herod was also fearful of Jesus. A short time earlier, Herod had thrown John the Baptist in jail. He wanted to kill John, but knew that he was a holy man and feared what might happen if he did. Then one day, Herod's daughter was dancing and entertaining Herod's guests at a banquet. Herod was pleased with her and told her she could have anything she requested. Herod's wife stepped in, telling their daughter that she should request the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Herod was fearful, but what could he do? He had promised to give his daughter what she requested. And so he had John beheaded. And the executioners brought his head into the banquet. As Jesus' fame grew, King Herod began to worry that Jesus would bring John back from the dead. Even Jesus' followers began to have second thoughts about him. But his 12 closest followers stuck by Jesus for what was sure to be tough times ahead.
Well, Jesus did talk to many people, having many disciples, and then found eventually that there were only about 12 that really stuck with him. There were many others, but there were 12 that he had invested most deeply within. And we see that this morning in that scripture that I read from the book of John, where there's a group of people and they begin to kind of break up. Have you ever been in a big group and had it begin to kind of fall apart? Like maybe a baseball game, it was just terrible, and the home team was just doing terribly, and people were like, gave up on it, they're frustrated and disgusted. Or have you ever been to a movie that was like really bad, and people begin to leave in the middle of it? Or maybe a speaker, and people just disagree with them. And they start, it's kind of an awkward feeling, isn't it? It's kind of like, we're all here, we're the group, and now the group's breaking up. It's kind of frustrating and awkward to see people act as if they're like done. They have no more value in this thing, so they're done with them, they're done with you, they're done with just the whole group. But that's what we see this morning. Jesus is talking to a bunch of people, and they're struggling with what he's having to say about what will become the Lord's Prayer. And they're offended. And they get up and they leave. Now, it doesn't help that it's a tough issue. This issue Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about eating his body and bread, which is language we use all the time. The word in Greek, there is no word for body, but the word that Jesus is using is flesh. You will eat my flesh. You will drink my blood. That's kind of a tough idea. And it doesn't help that they have the evil one is sitting there whispering in their ears saying, "Ooh, isn't that like cannibalism?" Now, today, if I say, I met them in the flesh, It just meant I really met somebody. They were right there. It doesn't mean I'm a cannibal. But that's what the people were struggling with. But these people are probably struggling with a lot of ideas. And you know, these aren't like horrible people. These are probably people we would like, we would appreciate. They're struggling with their faith. They're digging into it. But they come to this meeting with Jesus, and they have some ideas that are their ideas. They have ideas that kind of define them, that they hold on to, that are important to them. And so Jesus is challenging those ideas, and they're offended. And so they leave. Now, there are a lot of ideas in our faith that are tough. There are a lot of ideas that, frankly, are a bit offensive to us, and certainly difficult to us. And one of the first that comes to mind for me is what we call the scandal of particularity. Jesus says, no one comes to the Father except through me. No one comes to the Father except through me. That is pretty intolerant. That's just not cool to say today. But Jesus says it. And by the way, is that terribly fair? I mean, think of all the people living in the mountains of Borneo or the wilds of the Amazon who've just never heard the Christian story, just don't know who God is. Is it fair that they don't have hope for their future with Him because they never heard the story? That's a tough one. There are all other kinds of questions. How about evil and suffering? Petra was talking to me the other day about some issues about why doesn't God just make it all right? Why is there evil and suffering in the world when God could just snap His fingers and change it all? But what about people who don't really, or they're not Christians, but they have a really sincere understanding of God in the trees or God in the world? Or how about people that just really sincerely, devotedly follow their religion? How about those really difficult scriptures like, if you want to be a disciple, you got to hate your mother and father and brother and sister? Or God's command to His people when they went into Canaan and other times to destroy everything and destroy everyone. Those are tough learnings, aren't they? And they're questions that we have that we probably really feel like we should have answers to. Now, what happens to me when I see something like this is I begin to say, well, did God really say that? And I step away a little bit. And then I read something I don't quite believe, and I say, well, you know what? I believe. And then I will tend to say, well, I wonder if that translation is really correct, because that's really not, that doesn't make sense. Or the classic, and I don't tend to do this, but you see a lot of people, well, my God wouldn't do that. Well, your God is not that God. What happens is we have these troubling passages or these troubling ideas, and we begin to step, and pretty soon we're like those people in the meeting with Jesus that just walked away. They stepped farther and farther away from what He was saying. But when we do that, we kind of wonder, oh my gosh, do I have enough faith here? Am I really believing the things that are important? Am I really a faithful Christian? You know, if you had been in that meeting with Jesus when He said those tough things and He offended you to that degree, would you maybe have been somebody who walked out? Those ideas are important. Those ideas are what would hold our faith together. There are a lot of people in church, but take away their friends, Take away the beautiful building, take away the identity, and all you have are these tough ideas. Are you really a faithful person? Or are those just the trappings that you hold on to? Because Christianity doesn't always make sense. And we need an abundance of faith sometimes to hold on to it when those types of questions just don't work for us. Do you have an abundance of faith that lets you hold on to your Christianity? Because you need an abundance of faith. Do you have it? The answer is yes, you do. You have an abundance of faith. You know, it may not be sitting in the palm of your hand right now, but God has an abundance of faith, and He gives to you what you need when He decides you need it. You know, we'd all like to think that we have our faith, and we do it our way. But Jesus says this morning, what did He say? No one can come to me unless the Father has enabled him. We are people of faith because God gives us faith. Sometimes huge amounts of faith, and we're fine with all these questions. And sometimes only a little amount. And these questions really bother us. And when that happens, when we struggle, it's really easy for us to say, gosh, I wonder if I have faith. Am I really a faithful person? And there's an answer to that. There's an answer you can find to that. You can always know whether you have faith. Because even in your darkest moment, even in that moment when you say, I just don't believe anymore, you can ask yourself, do I want faith? And if the answer to the question, do I want faith, is, I don't have it, but yes, I want it, that is evidence that you have it. When you want faith, it's because you already have it. Maybe not much of it, but you already have it. You can prove to yourself that you are a person of faith because you desire it. Jesus came, and suddenly He's raising the dead and pulling out demons and walking on water and feeding people and challenging people, and their heads are spinning. And they don't know what to believe. I know each of us, we hear these types of questions, and when the world comes to us and says, that's foolishness, prove it to me. How can you believe that? And it can make our heads spin. And it can make us ask, really? Is that what we believe? Am I really a faithful person? But just because we ask that question doesn't mean we need to question, are we really in God's family? God gives us the faith we need to hold on to that identity in portions He thinks are important. Sometimes a lot, and sometimes very little. There was a man who fell down a cliff. And on the way down to the cliff, he's scrambling, and he grabbed onto a tree. And he's holding on to that tree for dear life, battered and bruised. And he looks up into the sky, and he says, "Is there anybody there?" And a voice booms out of the cloud and says, "I am here. I am the Lord. Have faith. I will save you." And the man looked up and he said, "Lord, Yes, I do have faith, but I can't hang on much longer. And the voice said, have faith, let go, and I will catch you. And the man looked up, looked around, and then said, is there anybody else up there? He didn't have an abundance of faith. But you know what he had? Enough to know that there was a God up there. And after a while, he had to let go of that branch. And because he was a man of faith, as little as that was, his Lord caught him. You have faith, even when you wonder if you really do. So, struggle with these questions. Wonder about these questions. Doubt these questions. Be uncertain in these questions, but know that you do that from a place of being a faith-filled person. And do that struggling knowing that you are not alone. Because you are not. He will always catch you. Good news? Yeah. In Jesus' name.